I'm always on the hunt for weird and interesting controllers. While I was scrolling through Amazon, I came across an intriguing and unique controller that looks quite familiar, so I decided to pick it up. This is the IFYOO GT01 gaming touchpad controller. For simplicity, I'm just going to refer to it as the GT. The standout feature of this controller is that it imitates a keyboard and mouse, while most controllers aim to do the opposite. So this makes it quite unique in my opinion. It's packed with buttons that perform multiple different functions, and the design choices are quite interesting. One of the other key selling points of the GT is its wireless functionality, powered by a 750 milliamp battery that promises over 40 hours of use. I could see it, I guess. It also includes motion controls, though I need more time to fully test this thing out and see if it's actually worth spending 50 bucks on a controller with a touchpad and motion control. Wait, isn't that the Steam controller? The GT is also compatible with PC, Xbox, and PlayStation consoles, specifically any game that supports mouse and keyboard inputs. It should work flawlessly on any of those games. With that being said, let's get into the unboxing. Inside the box, you'll find the controller, a 2.4 GHz receiver, a USB Type-C cable, and a user manual. Inside the user manual, they also have a 90-day warranty, which is nice, but I'm not sure how you'll go about accessing claims if you break this controller, because you could buy this thing from AliExpress or Amazon. But I do think it's a nice touch. Setting up the GT with your PC, Xbox, or PlayStation is simple. Just plug the receiver or the USB cable into an available USB port. To power on the controller, press the escape button on the bottom. This will light up the LED lights at the top, indicating that it's on and it's working. To adjust the trackpad settings, hold down the setting button and press the left D-pad to decrease the sensitivity or the right to increase it. There's 4 LED lights on top and they will indicate what setting you're on to reflect the changes. To enable motion control, hold down the settings button, click the scroll wheel. Yes, this thing has a scroll wheel. This will activate motion control at all times. Additionally, you can configure it to only activate while using the trackpad or pressing a specific button. To tweak the motion control settings, hold down the settings button, then press up on the D-pad to increase it or down to decrease it. Now that we got our settings all figured out and where you might like them, let's talk a little bit more about the button layout. On the right-hand side of the controller, there's a large trackpad, which imitates your mouse movement, while on the left-hand side, you have a joystick that imitates the WASD keys. I actually quite like this design, and if you press down, this is control on your keyboard. There's buttons that have dual functionality. For instance, by holding the function key located on the back of the controller, pressing a button can trigger ultimate inputs. For an example, pressing 1 normally inputs 1 on the keyboard, but holding down the function key can change it to 5. This gives each key multiple purposes. At the front of the controller, you have 4 buttons that imitate your mouse triggers and 2 keyboard keys. The mouse triggers are a trigger style on the left and a bumper style on the right. The left one is your left click, while the right one is your right click on your mouse. And your 2 side bumpers as well are Q and E, which are next to your W key. Switching back to the front, below the trackpad, you find Q, R, V, and F, and the scroll wheel. On the right hand side, you also find Z, X, and Alt keys, and if we switch the controller to the back, you'll find the function key, shift, and spacebar. I do like the way spacebar is placed because your thumb is, well, your index finger, your middle finger, is always resting on the spacebar. One of the other hidden buttons that I didn't know about when I first looked at the controller is you have a button under the mouse pad. There's actually 2. So right now I have both of them queued up as E and Q, which is fine, but they are hidden and it is actually a quite nice touch under the trackpad, so you have an extra button. With all that being said, there's a lot of buttons because it's got to imitate a keyboard and mouse. So how good is it for gaming? Well, that's a bit complicated. I played several games, while some performed fantastically with the GT controller, others were downright awful. It really depends on how well you can optimize the controller's functionality and how many keys the game requires. For an example, I enjoyed playing Call of Duty quite a bit. I tried multiple zombie matches with this controller, and since Call of Duty is designed for both PC and console, the simplistic controls work very well with the GT's limited button layout. However, the trackpad is a bit finicky. While there's options to adjust the sensitivity, I found that the second setting works perfectly for Call of Duty. Turning around quickly to deal with zombies behind you, dodging their attacks, or just trying to swipe to get a better look to someone to the right of you is impossible with a trackpad. But I still find the experience enjoyable. Additionally, I started using motion control, which hit a lot of these downsides of the trackpad. Once I had that figured out, we moved on to the next thing. Next, I tested the controller in Aim Labs to compare the trackpad to the previous version I reviewed. Unfortunately, the trackpad feels the same, and I still struggled with it. I'm just not good with trackpads. While I landed a few decent shots, they were few and far between. So I decided to move on to single player games, which I'm much better at with a trackpad, even though I've used a similar controller for a long time and I'm still stuck with it. I played Everspace 2, and it was quite decent with this controller. There's definitely a very large learning curve, but once you get used to it and tweak your settings, I had a pretty enjoyable time. This controller does require some dedication to master it, but if you're willing to invest the time, it can be a lot of fun. I also tried Halo Infinite Firefight, which was an absolute blast with this controller. I played over 4 games, I performed very well, and the trackpad's limitations weren't noticeable. It was a great experience overall. I think it was less noticeable because this game is designed for a controller at the end of the day. Plus, the motion control helped hide a lot of the imperfections again. However, Apex was less impressive. While it worked okay, I wouldn't recommend using this controller for multiplayer games. It's much harder to stay consistent against other players because you're using a trackpad. I do think if you got really good with it, like the Steam controller, you could be absolutely unstoppable. But I don't really have the time to dedicate multiple days, weeks, months into being really good at this controller. I'm decent, I'm not great. This is where the downside started to begin. The lack of a dedicated app like Steam's configurator is a deal breaker. All the configurations must be done directly on the controller itself. While adjusting sensitivity in the game helps to improve the experience, you're still stuck with the controller's default settings for the trackpad. You can increase or decrease the sensitivity, but you can't make fine-tune adjustments like controller spin or maintaining consistent feedback. Compared to the Steam controller, which offers an insane customization through the Steam configurator, the GT trackpad feels mediocre. It's not terrible, it does its job, but there's a lot of room for improvement. The lack of a configurator or software really limits this controller a lot. As for the motion control, while it works well and it does complement the trackpad, again, you lack the fine-tuning options. You can adjust the roll and tilt separately, but the sensitivity is too high most of the time. On the Steam controller, I typically set the motion control sensitivity to 15, but on the GT, the controller feels like it's always at 50%. Even at the lowest setting, it's way too much. It's way too much. I need to bring it down like 10 to 15% more than what the lowest setting lets me. Doesn't matter if I just only have the tilt on or the roll, it's still just too much. This makes it quite hard to use effectively. With that being said, combining the motion control with the trackpad does result in a decent gaming experience. Definitely better than the previous version of this controller I tested. While the motion control can be overwhelming at times, but it does help mitigate some of the trackpad's shortcomings. Enough with the trackpad and the sensitivity, let's talk about the button layout. The button layout isn't bad considering the challenge of recreating a keyboard and mouse layout on a controller. The GT does a decent job. After a few weeks of use, I got used to it, especially since I had prior experience with a similar device, the Dark Walker. While the GT is an improvement over the Dark Walker, thanks to the motion control and the wireless functionality, the button layout remains the same, which I actually appreciate. Where the GT controller truly shines is in niche games. I played hours of City Skylines, shipbuilder games, and tons of different sort of RTS games, and I even enjoyed Call of Duty Zombies. This controller performs very well in indie games or titles without native controller support. It offers a more enjoyable experience than a standard Xbox or PlayStation controller in these cases. Because it imitates a keyboard and mouse, you don't have to do some sort of weird configuration. You can go play Valorant with this thing. Comparing the GT controller to the Dark Walker is a wired version of this controller, but it lacks some major functionality like the motion control, adjustable sensitivity, and the wireless function. While I enjoyed using the Dark Walker and made several videos about it, the GT is clearly an upgrade. The added functions makes it a much better and an enjoyable experience overall. Though I wish there was still more customization with settings, sensitivity, motion control, and maybe a little bit more buttons or a better function style, still a good experience. With that all being said, here's my final thoughts. At the end of the day, if you're looking for a budget-friendly controller that offers more versatility than an Xbox or PlayStation controller, but without breaking the bank account from buying a Steam controller off eBay, the GT is a good option. I have used this controller for a very long time, 2 years to be exact, and I have enjoyed gaming on it a lot. RTSs, some multiplayer games, they're okay. I wouldn't recommend it. It's pretty hard to be good with it. It's a lot of fun though, but it really comes down to what you're looking for. Are you looking for a controller that has a trackpad and motion control, which the Steam controller is wonderful for that, or are you looking for something that imitates a keyboard and mouse, which this is a one-of-a-kind type of controller. Well, I'm gonna leave it there. You guys have a wonderful night, and I'll catch you in my next video.